Hello, and welcome to Live from NYPL. Thank you everyone out there who's watching with us tonight or anytime in the future. My name is Aidan Flax Clark, and I work at the New York Public Library, bringing you live from NYPL, and I'm just so thrilled that you've taken the time to join us. Now, I'm sitting here in front of a map of the 5 boroughs of New York, which, if you know the most recent books by tonight's author, you will know feels like an appropriate image that I've chosen from our digital collections. And if you don't know yet, you will soon, because you'll find out more during the conversation. And then, of course, you're going to go out and get the books right away, and you're going to read them immediately, and then you'll know everything. And whose books are those? N.K. Jemisin, of course. You know her, 4-time Hugo Award winner, the Broken Earth series, the Dreamblood duology, the Inheritance trilogy, and of course, this most recent series, the Great Cities books, the second and final installment of which, The World We Make, is what she's here to talk about tonight. The map, by the way, was printed in 1919, and not only can it be found online on our digital collections, it can also be found in person in our Lionel Pincus and Princess Furiel map division, which just reopened in our main branch last week after being closed for some construction. I gotta say, in a building filled with a lot of really cool divisions, the map division is really, really cool. It's one of the world's premier map collections in terms of size, scope, unique holdings, and diversity. There are more than 433,000 sheet maps in it. There are over 20,000 books and atlases printed between the 16th and the 21st centuries. There are maps of cities, countries, stars, everything in between and beyond. And if you ever find yourself doing research in that division, consider yourself extremely lucky. Anyway, back to tonight. Nora was actually here in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic to do one of our first virtual events when she had just published The City We Became, which is the predecessor to The World We Make. And we're just so thrilled that she's back with us to talk about this new one and about concluding the series, and that she's here to do it with the incredible, amazing, one and only LeVar Burton. What can I say? You're gonna love it. The World We Make is available for purchase through the library shop. You should be seeing a link in the chat now to find that. The address is shop.nypl.org. Nora has signed book plates, so every copy that you purchase from us will be signed. And on top of that, all proceeds from your purchase go to benefit the New York Public Library. And of course, you can check out The World We Make, plus all of Nora's other books, plus books by LeVar Burton, if you have your New York Public Library card, which I am sure all of you living in New York and nearby have, yes? All right, I'm just going to trust that you do. If not, I'm going to come find you. So because of scheduling, Nora and LeVar were unable to do this live, and this conversation was recorded last week. However, Nora is here and excited to answer some of your questions live after the conversation. So please stick around, start getting your questions ready now, and whenever you have them, you can put them in the chat or email them to us at publicprograms@nypl.org. And we will make sure that she sees them. And like I said, Nora will be here live after the conversation to answer some of your questions. And she really wants to hear from you. Live from NYPL is made possible by the continuing generosity of Celeste Bartos, Manaz Ispahani Bartos, and Adam Bartos, not to mention all of you, our wonderful supporters, near, far, and everywhere in between. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all of your support. And with that, please enjoy this incredible conversation between N.K. Jemisin and LeVar Burton. And again, stick around afterward for a live Q&A with Nora herself.
Hey, y'all, LeVar Burton here, and it is my extreme and joyous pleasure to be with 4-time Hugo Award-winning novelist and one of my favorite writers on the planet, N.K. Jemisin, who is here to have a conversation tonight about her latest release. What I love when writers give us more than we need in providing context for the journey that we're about to go on. And Nora, I've heard this, the last novel and this one, referred to as the Great Cities Duology, right? Mm-hmm. And I love that, because the city we became and now the world we make, they are companion pieces. They go together. They tell a story on a canvas that could not necessarily be done in a single novel. And now the second part of the duology is available for us to enjoy. N.K. Jemisin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the welcome. I will point out that it was originally going to be a trilogy. So changes happened.
Tell me about that.
I can talk about those if you want.
You had in your mind, you had mapped it out for 3 books, right? Mm-hmm. And you wrote the first one. Mm-hmm. And after the first one, was it still 3?
No. So I pitched it to my publishers as a trilogy. And I had outlined basic plots for all 3 books. And then 2020 happened. March 2020, when the City We Became came out, was also the start of COVID.
Right.
And as we all know, COVID changed a whole lot of things. Yeah, the world changed. New York changed. And this is a book about New York. But I will also say that part of it was my original plot for the second book of the trilogy was going to be a demagogue president attacking New York City for being politically out of line with him. And
are you psychic and whatnot?
I don't want to be. I do not want to. I don't. This is a gift. Take it from me. But yeah, so I think it was also the writing was really visible on the wall to my writer brain. Sure. It was visible on the wall to a lot of us. But then the exact thing happened. And at that point, I was like, thanks, Trump, you stole my idea. Well, and some other stuff. But anyway, we'll try and keep
some
this,
other stuff.
We'll try and keep this on off that topic.
We're taking the high road tonight. We are, in fact, hosted by the New York Public Library. So y'all read between the lions and the lines, because some of this conversation will be conducted in code.
Yes, that's a very good way to frame it. So I had to change my general plan for all 3 books after mistakes were made, changes were necessary. And then at that point, also what with the pandemic, New York as an entity, as a character, which is what I had been trying to put into the story. New York as a character was going through a transformation, still is going through that transformation.
Indeed.
And so I found myself struggling to make New York to make myself understand the new New York as it was going through this midlife crisis, basically. Right. And I just kind of reassessed and realized I didn't have 3 books worth of material anymore. I rearranged some plot elements, threw in an ending that I thought would be satisfying, and left it open in case the urge to write a 3rd book still came back. So that was the idea.
So and I'm sure the numbers are small to negligent, but just give us the sort of the Reader's Digest thumbnail version of the City We Became, which will serve as the foundation for our conversation for the world that we make.
So people who are fans of H.P. Lovecraft will get probably more out of this than folks who are not. But and people who are from New York will probably get more out of it than people who are not. But basically, there's a kind of key idea in Lovecraft's fiction, and it seems to have been in his real thinking as well, that the people who exist in a city are changing it, are giving some kind of energy to it. In his letters and fiction, it appeared that what he thought those people were bringing to the city was corruption, decay. He famously wrote about walking through Chinatown and seeing everyone around him, all of the Chinese people around him, as dangerous mental machines who had, obvious intelligence but no souls. And he was creeped out by this. And meanwhile, I'm walking through Chinatown and I'm like feeling this energy and smelling the scents and listening to people cuss each other out in a language I don't know. And it just feels like quintessential New York to me. It feels like it's adding something, growing something in New York. So I decided to write a story about 6 people who feel the call of their city. And who then go through a kind of magical transformation. One becomes the avatar of New York altogether. The other 5 become the avatars of the 5 boroughs. And they develop magic powers, things like the ability to kind of quasi-teleport by harnessing the energy of the subway, for example. And then they have to do battle against a terrible entity called the Woman in White. Who is white. Yes, who is modeled on Lovecraftian entities in many ways, including wiggly tentacles. Yeah, so that's basically it.
So you are a native New Yorker, yes? Or transplanted New Yorker.
Yes, I've been here enough that I consider myself like 50% New Yorker. The other 50% is from Alabama. So it's a little schizoid there.
I get it. I was raised in Sacramento, not born there, but raised in Sacramento. I've lived in Los Angeles for longer than anywhere else I've lived on the planet. I consider myself a native Angelino, even though Sacramento is still my hometown, right? So the idea, you are known for your phenomenal ability to build worlds that we love existing in, we love visiting, we love immersing ourselves in them. So the idea of creating in your cast of characters avatars for the city of New York and the 5 boroughs, that's pretty bold and out there. Don't you think? I mean, I think so.
I mean,
it's probably not out there for your imagination.
Yeah, my imagination goes to places that y'all may never see.
I get that. I understand.
Yeah.
So how was it then? How was it then? World building in a place that was ultimately very familiar to you. Were there any surprises that you found?
Yeah, I found it actually much more challenging than creating a world completely from scratch.
From whole cloth.
Yeah, because people don't live in the stillness or Gujarat or any of the other worlds that I've built. So I don't have to answer to people when I get the details wrong. A neighborhood that is not in Brooklyn, that is actually in Queens, Rockaway Parkway. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm so sorry. I moved a rock that was in a park to a different location, and I'm never going to get out of it. I heard all about it. I will never stop hearing about it, I think. So, yeah. But beyond
be that as it may. Yeah, be that as it may. For the rest of the audience who are not so butthurt by minor inconsistencies in your created world and the world that they live in, you are indeed a master at it. And if you have not visited, if you've not seen NK's masterclass on world building, please, y'all, if do yourself a favor. If you have any intentions toward writing speculative fiction at all, please download that episode. It is chock full of so much wisdom, and it's delivered from the master herself. So there's that. So the city we became, you established this world, you established these characters, and so the intention for the sequel, for the world we make.
So the world we make takes up about 3 months after the events of the city we became. And for people that haven't read the first book, I'm going to try and avoid spoilers. But the gist of it is that the battle changes. What had been kind of more direct magic versus, gentrifying Cthulhu, because that was one of the forces that the woman in white works through. But, sort of that direct battle can no longer happen because of something that occurred at the end of the first book. And so the woman in white changes tactics. And she then supports, or in the second book, she will support a mayoral candidate for running for mayor for New York City, who's based on some local politicians that people from New York will probably recognize. But he's an amalgamation of those, basically. And he's bad news. He's running for mayor of the city, and he wants to do some things. And his slogan is "Make New York Great Again." Sorry, I apologize.
I just got triggered.
I'm sorry. I could see that pain for a moment.
Seriously, but it's important. See, I am a firm believer that speculative fiction really can be an aid to us. It can help us navigate the present moment circumstances we find ourselves in. So I am intensely interested in fiction that sort of begins where we are, right? And explores then different routes to the truth, right? Which is what we are always seeking in life, if not literature. We are indeed seeking for the truth. So I'm all about it. All about it.
Well, and while I was writing it, the New York mayoral race was actually happening.
Right.
Didn't end up quite the way I wanted it to. I will refrain from further comment about that. But
the good thing about being a world builder is you get to build the world the way you want.
And I needed that catharsis. I needed to write a world that was very close to what was happening in our own, but where better things happened.
Yes.
So I guess we'll have to see whether my wish fulfillment is actually effective. I'll see how audiences like it. But at the end of the day, I'm always kind of writing for myself, and I enjoyed it. So going to just share it and see what other people think.
That's so important, I think, for writers in the audience. Would you say that again? At the end of the day, you are writing for whom?
Me, myself, and I. Yep.
So much of the process of beginning writers is about pleasing an audience, right? You are an audience of one.
Yeah. And it is a natural tendency for beginning writers to want to think about what will sell, what will be a hit. But it's a mistake. Just looking at the publishing life cycle, even if you're self-publishing, if you are writing strictly about what is hot, if you are clinging to, fads or trends or things like that, by the time that book comes out, it's going to be over. And even me trying to write to the New York mayoral race, well, that ended like a year ago. And I wasn't trying to write in order to influence it, obviously. I was just kind of processing my own feelings about things that were happening. And that's the only constant that you have. You and your tastes and what you want to read. You should write what you want to read. And if nothing else, you will at least not feel like you are disappointing yourself. Right. Even if your book flops, you've still done something that was good for yourself and maybe for other people who choose to read it. So,
words to live by for writers. Let's talk about the politics in your work, and most particularly in this duology. I personally believe that there are politics in everything. I feel like you feel similarly. Let's talk about your work as a commentary or a reflection of our current present moment in this world, and even more particularly as these two novels are set in New York, where we are in America right now.
We're going
to have that conversation.
We're just going to have to use a lot more coded language, I think. So
okay,
but we'll see how good I am at that. We'll try. what it kind of comes down to for me is I agree with the idea that there is politics in everything. If you are writing a story about people, a polity, a group of people, maybe you can write a story about a single individual and that might somehow manage to avoid politics. But frankly, I don't even think so. Because even then, that story about a single individual is going to start falling into sort of common archetypal categories that our society chooses to advance for whatever reason, like the rugged individual or the creepy loner or whatever. Right. So you can't really write a story about people without getting into politics. And I've always believed that since I'm writing fantasy and science fiction, I can mess with everything. I can change the rules of how every aspect of society works. I can change the laws of physics if I want to cause magic to exist or space magic to exist. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I don't ever want to get wrong is people. And I've tried very hard to avoid, even in a case of something like this set of books where I am deliberately playing with stereotypes, the avatars of the various boroughs fit into New Yorkish conceptions of what those boroughs mean or like, what they are characterized as. I didn't have to reach that far to figure out what New York's various boroughs would be like. There's Staten Island, which is always like the lone Republican borough out of all of the blue rest of New York. It's where most people drive instead of riding the subway like the rest of New York. It's just culturally very different from the rest of the city. Still 100% New York. The Beastie Boys and Wu-Tang would not let me discard any of that.
Staten Island? No.
And so it's not a thing that I am kind of struggling with in order to characterize these parts of the city. But what I wanted to do was take that stereotype and then elaborate on it and turn these stereotypes or archetypes, if you want to think of them that way, into complete three-dimensional people. Right. So, you start with the idea that the character Staten Island is going to be kind of naturally xenophobic, a little afraid of crossing the ferry into the city, afraid of public transportation, all of these things. And then you riff on that. You turn her into a complete person, maybe not a likable person, but a real person. Mm-hmm. And I go for plausibility over I guess storytelling more than anything else when it comes to things like that.
Okay, I'm going to just put a pin in that. I want people to really hear this. The emphasis on plausibility, right? Tell a believable story, right? Mm-hmm. If you're riffing on a world that already exists, or you're riffing on something completely of your own invention, make it believable. Make the characters and the events, the plot, plausible.
Yeah. I mean, even when you're writing fantasy, like I run into people all the time who are, and I personally have a distaste for fantasy that is kind of overly concerned with rules and sort of conservation of mass and, all of that stuff. The rules of the laws of thermodynamics. Right. And I 100% agree with the idea that magic should be unpredictable, not necessarily reproducible. It should not adhere to the principles of science. Because it's supposed to be something different. Right. At the same time, in science fiction, there's a thing called Clarke's Law, which you've probably heard of, which is any sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from any sufficiently advanced science. Science is indistinguishable from magic. And there's a corollary to that that comes from the comic Girl Genius. So I guess you can call it the Girl Genius corollary, which is that any sufficiently complexified or analyzed magic is indistinguishable from science. And so that was what I wanted to play with. That's what I've constantly played with.
Yes.
So I did it again here.
Yeah. To our benefit, without question. Yeah.
But the idea is that you are trying to sell this magic or science or whatever it is to an audience. And it doesn't have to be realistic. They just have to believe. For however brief a time that they're reading that book, they have to shift into a place where this could happen. And if I do my job right, then it's a smooth and seamless transition.
As a storyteller, myself, when I'm directing and reading a script, I look to see, does it make sense to me? If I'm writing a script, does it make sense to me? Because if the logic flows for me, I can make other people believe that logic, right? But it has to make sense to me.
Yeah. So it's a kind of sleight of hand, or a literary sleight of hand, I guess, if you want to frame it that way. Right. But I am constantly aware of the fact that readers are more skeptical these days. Readers are less willing to suspend disbelief and things like that. And I am also less willing to suspend disbelief. I'm probably my own harshest critic. So the reason that I focus solely on myself and what I like is because if I can sell it to me, then I can probably sell it to other people. Probably.
Same thing. I totally understand that. So in dealing with the politics of the New York that you have created, which bears a resemblance in a lot of ways to the New York that any New Yorker would recognize. Talk about some of the challenges in terms of what you wanted to say about these characters and the representations of the energy of New York in your stories.
Well, there were a couple of things that happened in the second book that I think really added to it. One, because I was doing a mayoral campaign, and I've lived through plenty of mayoral campaigns, but I've never done one. I've never run for mayor. And so I needed to figure out the right kind of research to do. And I befriended a community organizer, Whitney who was working at the time for the mayoral campaign of the campaign ended up not going great. I don't know if she wants to be talked about, so I'm going to leave it at that. But she ended up working on a mayoral campaign, and she referred me to some other people who basically told me how to run for mayor of New York. And so I took a crash course in how to run for mayor, and so that I could insert the right kinds of moments and issues to be concerned with and so forth. And one of the things that Whitney explained to me, which I thought was great, was about how mayoral campaigns are about gathering energy, gathering momentum, pulling in new people, getting them excited, sending them forth to get other people excited. And, once you break a certain momentum threshold, then it's just like riding on a train of energy and excitement. And so I tried to structure the book that way. Right. And hopefully I successfully did so. The other thing that I was struggling with, I guess, while I was working on the book was that's a spoiler. Yeah, we're going to need to cut that bit out. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay.
Yeah. Let me change gears and try talking about something else. So another thing that I was struggling with while I was doing this was that the actual mayoral campaign was beginning to shape up in some ways that I thought, it ended up the candidate that I was afraid was going to win did actually end up winning. Yeah. And so, I had to kind of struggle with my own disappointment while writing this hopeful place where a better outcome.
The train track.
Yeah. So my own energy and momentum, kind of hit a wall at that point. And sure. that was an ongoing issue. But I think I was able to circumvent that by focusing on the individual character struggles. Each of the viewpoint characters in the story has a kind of shallow character arc. People who are wondering whether Manny and Neek the avatar of New York City goes by Neek, NYC with the Y pronounced like E. But whether Manny and Neek were going to get together. So I spent a lot of time focusing on that instead. And then there were people who were trying to figure out like what was Manny's mysterious background, what exactly was going on with Brooklyn as she decides to run for mayor as part of what's happening in the second book, and so on. So focusing on the small human issues helped me get over the grander political issues. Still political, just smaller scale.
Right. In terms of the grander political, I'm going to hazard a guess that that Maya Wiley was kind of in your zeitgeist as you were writing.
Yes. There was another candidate that I liked for a while, and her campaign sort of crashed and burned. And so, that was where some of the disappointment came from.
Gotcha.
I liked Maya Wiley. I liked, oh my gosh, Catherine. Oh, that's not her name. All right. I have a terrible memory for names. So
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I was just trying to be clever and decipher. Decipher. You sort of, being,
My preferred candidate got busted for bribery. So there's not a whole lot.
I hate when that happens.
Not a whole lot I could say about that. So and she also, her campaign staff ended up walking off because she didn't pay them well and so on. So that was a complete crash and burn.
Wow.
As I'm trying to draw energy from her campaign to write about this fictional campaign. It was a little bit of a challenge.
Doesn't it? It just sucks when our heroes disappoint us, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, politicians are never going to be my heroes, but
right.
I do like the idea of, kind of finding someone whose message is at least like 75% to where I want it to be.
Right.
They're never going to be 100%. And, hoping that person is able to get into a place where they can do close to 75% of what they promise. I'll take 50%. But looked like we were not going to get any percent. So,
right.
So that's where we are.
Yeah, that is indeed where we are.
Mm-hmm.
So New York, your hometown, your post-Alabama hometown. You write these two novels. What is your hope for this second novel and for the duology in general? What would the perfect outcome for N.K. Jemisin be in terms of not necessarily the noise and the accolades, because you're like money in that respect. You write and the awards follow, right? However, the experience of the reader is what I'm really going for. Mm-hmm. What would you like for us to have felt, learned, experienced on this journey?
I guess what I always want is just simply for my readers to be entertained. I get accused sometimes of trying to push some kind of agenda. That's not what I'm doing. I think of myself as a storyteller. I'm not a verbal storyteller. That's a different art form, and one that I much respect, but I'm doing it in written form, and I want the reader to get lost in what I am doing. A good story, whether it is told verbally, via song, whatever, a good story takes you out of the world for a while and into a different place. You may not like what happens there. It's not always going to be great, but you are living in a different space, a different thought process, different ideas. You care about the characters. You want to see what happens to them. And at the end of the day, you come back to the world feeling a little different, maybe better, but just different at the end of the day. And that's all I ever want. I just want readers to come away from my books and be like, that was a good story. And, pass it on to somebody else and tell them to get it too.
And if along the way they are changed in in some way, altered somehow in their thinking or feeling, that's a bonus.
I just want people to think. I don't want particular changes. I want them, I can't change people's minds about particular issues. But if they read about characters who have identities that are different from their own, and they come away with a little bit more empathy, or if they read about characters whose identities are identical to their own, and then they see what other people, like maybe the author in this case, think of that, then maybe they'll be a little different. All I really want is for people to grow. In my old career, I used to be a counselor. I wanted to see people change in ways that they felt comfortable changing. You can't change people. That is one of the principles of counseling that I've kind of brought into the art world. You cannot make people change. You can offer them suggestions. You can present them with options. You can point out to them that the place where they are is problematic in some way. But then it's on them to make that decision and to move in a different direction. All I ever want to do is just hold up that mirror to readers and say, this is what you're looking at. This is what you look like. This is what you sound like. Think about that. And that's it. And if you enjoy that process, then even better.
Yeah. I have enjoyed it, and I know I'm not alone in that. Your ability to hold up the mirror and allow us to see ourselves really clearly, and then make a decision as to how we will move forward in the next moment is everything. You really challenge your readers to be better human beings, Nora.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, you do. You've challenged me to be a better human being.
How so?
You have.
I don't think that's possible. I really do.
No,
that's possible.
No, it's true.
Okay.
It's true. It's true because your writing probes deep into the human experience, right? And I see myself in your characters easily, readily. I don't have to think about it. You write for me. I feel like you write for me. And I go along on the journey willingly, readily, very easily. And so I look forward to being changed by the stories that you write, because inevitably they cause me to think and reevaluate who I am and how I am moving on this journey of life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm aware of the fact that people bring their own baggage to a story, and that you can't always assume that the change that occurs when they read is going to be what I want it to be.
Right.
With this particular series, one of the things that I realized is there's a lot of people that just hate New York, sight unseen, never visited, just on principle.
Have a predetermined opinion about it, and it's not good.
They can't stand the idea that New York exists, or they don't like how much hype it gets. They don't like how many movies are set there or whatever. And a large part of that is because there are so many people out there, politicians outside of New York, who use New York for whatever personal choices that they have. It is effective to either frame New York as all of America after 9/11. New York was, we were all New York was one of the slogans.
We were all New Yorkers, right?
Yeah. Right. And then 5 minutes later, when they wanted to build the Islamic Center in the mosque at Ground Zero, as it got framed by certain people. Well, no, those New Yorkers, what's wrong with them wanting Muslims in their midst? How dare they? So, yeah, I mean, New York is the either the punching bag or the flag that other politicians like to wave. And And I just wanted to write New York as New Yorkers feel. Obviously, I can't speak for 9 million people, but I wanted to write from the perspective of a New Yorker about how all of this feels and looks like and smells and how irritating it is and how at sometimes it is. We're willing to accept that mantle of, the representative city of America. Just take us as we actually are, not as whatever you think we should be. So that was it.
Have the grace and decency to see who we are before you make a decision about who we are. Yeah.
I mean, and New York is by no means perfect or great.
Or monolithic in any sense of the word.
All of the people that are talking about the terrible things that exist in New York, they're right. All the people that talk about the great things that exist in New York, they're right.
Both things can be true. Yeah. And that's the duality, right, of human experience. We are constantly in conflict about, the thing that is our point of focus. We are constantly in conflict about what it means and how it impacts us. And the truth is, it's not one answer. There's no one answer. Life is much more complicated than that, much more complex.
Yeah. People constantly try and reduce the shades of gray to black and white.
Right.
And that's just not how anything works.
Hardly appropriate.
Appropriate. Went muted on me for a second.
Yeah, I was saying hardly appropriate. That's you've got to be more flexible than that, right? You've got to be more flexible. In the few minutes that we have left, let's talk about other things that are on your writer's mind. As we, dive into the opportunity to enjoy the world we make, where is your imagination taking you next? Is there anything that you can tell us without spoilers about where you are thinking of taking us next time out?
I am working on a short story for the first time in years now.
Yay! As someone who loves short stories and reads short stories on my podcast, here's a shameless self-promotional plug. LeVar Burton Reads, where I read a short story in every episode. I say the only thing these stories have in common is that I love them, and I hope you will too. I have had the great pleasure of reading some of your stories in the podcast, and I am thrilled to know that you are producing more short fiction content. Yay.
The hilarity is that the way that you have read my stories has made me listen to them and go, wow, this is really good. Wait, I wrote it. So I have listened to my own stories read by you and just been riveted. And wow, this is a really good story. I wonder who, oh, wait, it's me.
That's you. Yeah, that's you. You did that. You did that.
But you like the performance and your voice kind of drowns out my own inner voice. When I'm reading a story, I hear my own inner critical voice, which is constantly like nitpicking it. Oh, this word is terrible. Oh, no, this sentence is going on too long. It's hard for me to shut that off. When I listen to someone else read, especially someone that's got a really good delivery and that gets the characters and I can feel that love, it's a completely different experience. So thank you for letting me experience my own writing like readers sometimes too.
It is the highest praise imaginable that while listening to a story of yours that I am reading, you discover new things in it that perhaps you hadn't seen or heard or before. And I thank you for that, because as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I simply love you. I love what you have brought to the table in this genre of fantasy and science fiction. I love your presence in this realm. I love your excellence, right? I love your mastery. And
thank
I
you.
love the worlds that you build for us. There is no greater pleasure for me than finding myself disappearing into the pages of a good book. And when I say disappearing, it's a matter of just surrendering myself to that experience, to that world, to the characters and the journey that they're on. And I am taken along in tandem on that journey with them. You are a master wordsmith. You are a master world builder. You are unparalleled in the genre.
Thank you.
In my view, you are at the top of the food chain, Nora.
We'll see how long that lasts.
And I don't mean to set you up for failure in any respect. I'm just saying this is how you have impacted my life as a fan of the genre and as an avid reader.
That is a joy to hear.
I think, my dear.
I mean, even I still have imposter syndrome and performance anxiety and all of that. So, thank you. I'm 2 weeks until the new book comes out. I'm in anxiety mode and you have allayed a lot of my stress. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the city we became and followed by the world we make. She sets them up and she knocks them down. If you are not a reader, please change your state and change your fate, because this woman is the real deal.
Oh.
N.K. Jemisin, y'all. Thank you.
Hi, Nora.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
That was
We
even
ready to
better
go?
to listen to the second time. So thank you again.
I was shocked. Yeah.
Thank you to LeVar Burton. He's obviously amazing.
Yes. Super praise hands. That actually, that was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
It's always a wonderful experience to talk to him.
He's one of the best. And there's so much love in the chat for both of you and so many good questions. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to get right to it.
Sure. Let's go.
All right, cool. And, at the end of the conversation, LeVar was talking about how much he loves your world building, which obviously all of us love about your writing. And there's a question local from New York. They wrote, I teach a collaborative world building class at Lehman College in the Bronx. What pitfalls would you warn emerging world builders about, and or what tips would you give?
Collaborative world building. That sounds interesting. Things to warn people about. I would just say, that's a tough one. Wow. Things to warn people about.
If you want, maybe is that easier?
Well, the tips, the problem with the tips is that I've literally done like a multi-hour long world building masterclass. And so those are my tips. That's like 5 hours worth of talking. But the things not to do, I also talked about in that, but just to sort of boil it down, you do have to kind of remember that with world building, it is, you're not trying to create the Silmarillion. I just mangled the name, the pronunciation of that. But you're not trying to, kind of create the entire world on down to like the socks. You do need to make it enough to feel lived in, and you do need to understand that what other people sort of latch on to as far as the interesting pieces of your world are not necessarily going to be the pieces that interest you. You do need to make sure that the stuff that is surrounding your characters is rock solid. Like if you just sit down and imagine a day in that character's life. They get up in the morning. What do they eat? What do they drink? Where do they go to the bathroom? How do they go to the bathroom? I actually had to research ancient Egyptian toilets at one point. That was fun. But like just walk them through their day, and that will force you to put in place the various systems of transportation, of food, the basic stuff that you need to kind of get that world together. So I would try, that's kind of like a combo tip slash warning. I hope that works.
Does for me. Okay. Related question that somebody asked about when you're starting a series and you know that you're planning a series, what your methods are for planning your stories across series. Do you start with plans for character arcs and plot lines while starting the first books that are going to kind of carry through multiple books after that?
I do. I usually write a kind of I could probably put that up on my website at some point, but I usually write a kind of little package that I put together that's like combination synopsis, character study, little brief blips about each bit, a very basic outline, like super basic, like 1 page per book, if that much. And so it's an outline of the entire trilogy or duology, if I'm planning that, as I intend for it to go. Now, I know up front that outline is going to be kind of loose, because as I actually work on the story, I think of new things, new characters pop up. Characters that I thought were going to be interesting turn out to be less so. Random characters turn out to be much more so, and so I'm able to adjust as the story dictates. But yeah, I do put together a very basic outline with like a list of characters, synopsis of all 3 books. In the character bits, I'll mention any particular arcs that they're going to go through or that I'm planning for them to go through. I have the end point in mind that I want to get to. The middle is the part that's a little marshmallowy, but I don't need to put that in there for that little profile. So, so I can at least put the ending in, but there's a whole lot of question marks in the middle. So I at least do that much, and I give that to my agent and my publisher for their ideas and suggestions, and in the case of my publisher, money. So, I
mean, it's the key, right?
Yeah, being able to make a living is kind of nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone asked a question about these books specifically, and they said that they haven't read much Lovecraft, and they were interested to hear that his work helped inspire The City We Became. And they asked if you could talk about your relationship to Lovecraft's work and advice that you have for approaching books that have, problematic authors or issues within the books themselves.
These complex questions.
I said they were good.
Yeah. Well, okay. So regarding approaching Lovecraft, just do a little research, engage with the fiction, understand kind of what is underlying that fiction, critical reading, the critical thinking, the same basic thing that I guess for me, I do that with every book. I would hope that other people do the same thing, but I know that not everybody reads in the same way. But in the case of Lovecraft, if you're going to be reading a story in which, frequently you're going to see marginalized people treated in a really concerning way, and in which you're going to see a protagonist, usually it's his protagonist's, sort of sense of justice triggered by things that really are I'm trying to find ways to sort of dance around talking about Lovecraft, and that's causing problems because I need to give specific examples. This is not a short answer kind of question. But what was the second half of that question? I'm sorry.
I mean, essentially, related to that issue of Lovecraft, just how do you deal with reading authors who are, let's say horrible racists, but turn out to have something that you like about their writing aside from that,
That's a lot of fiction I read. Let's just say, I'm not going to say most, but that's a whole lot of fiction I read. And it's the same process in every case. You read the book, You decide what you like about it and what you don't like about it. You start to kind of parse through the layers of meaning involved in both those likes and those dislikes. Are you bringing your own personal biases into those likes and dislikes? What are the author's personal biases, and can you see that reflected in their work? This is the same process that I think anybody should be doing with any fiction, because it's what makes fiction richer to read. Even if it's fiction that you don't feel uncomfortable about, it can be illuminating to understand more of like, what was the author intending? What did the author not intend that came across? Things like that. So that's it.
Okay. Someone here outing themselves as a psych major wants to know how your background in psychology has influenced your writing.
Oh, it's omnipresent. I spent a lot of time reading Freud, and Freud is problematic for a whole lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I found that I did like about Freud was the way that he engaged with dreams, for example. His book on dreams. And when I was writing what is the name of my own series? The Killing Moon, The Shadowed Sun. What the heck is my own series called? The Dream Blood. Good Lord. Yeah. Anyway, it's my duology from like 10 years ago. Or I actually wrote it 15 years ago. So of course that's why I don't remember. That's it. But anyway, so when I was writing The Dream Blood, I needed to kind of parse through whether I wanted to do sort of Freudian dream theory or whether I wanted to go with something else. And I ended up doing something that was kind of an amalgam of Freud and a little bit of Jung and some other stuff. As I go along with all of my characters now in other books, when I am parsing how those characters would react to trauma or how those characters would react to their own identity development, I am using what I know in order to make those characters feel more plausible and more realistic. Some of it is just the usual, like, this is what the character feels like to me. But those theories are in my head, and they've been in my head for more than half my life now. And this is just how I think about people now.
Now, there are, I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear, a number of Broken Earth related questions. Can we talk about a few of those, even though we're past
Sure.
those? Is that all right? Okay.
That's fine. I may not remember everything because, like, you just read, a lot of people who just read the book want to talk to me about things that happen, and I'm like, I wrote that like 8 years ago. I don't have that kind of memory, but okay.
All right.
We'll try.
Well, make it up, and I either won't know or I won't call you out on it. You know.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, a question from a professional geologist who said they adored the Broken Earth trilogy and wondered if you could talk about any background you had in geology, earth science that inspired the series.
Squat. I had no background in geology or earth science. I like rocks. I like big rocks, and I cannot lie. Anyway, so I just like rocks. That's really it. I am fascinated by seismic activity. Like, I grew up partially in New York and partially in Mobile, Alabama, and both places are flat. Upstate New York has the Catskills and things like that. Upstate Alabama approaches the Appalachians, but like the parts that I grew up in, not even hills. So, I like earthquakes. I like volcanoes. I'm fascinated by mountains. I just want to understand how this planet came to be what it did, how other planets come to be what they are. That's always going to be fascinating to me. It is possible that in another life, I would have been drawn into one science or another because I have equal fascination with theoretical physics, but my math sucks. So, it's possible that in another life where I had better math teachers back in the day, I could have gone into the sciences. But instead, I had really, really good writing teachers. So that's what I did instead.
Well, God bless those writing teachers.
I did do a lot of research, but it may look like there was a lot more geoscience in the books than there is. I just fudged it. That's what writing is. Once again, you want to make it look plausible. It may not be 100% correct, but you want it to feel plausible. And so I did at least that much.
Yeah, it's just, elaborate version of fake it till you make it, right?
Or fake it till the book is out, and then you hear from all the people who see how wrong you got it. But for now, so far so good.
Well, we just have time for one more question,
Oh.
and I think this is a really good closer. They asked, what surprised you about your own writing, and what have you discovered about yourself that you wouldn't have had you not written a particular book?
All these not easy questions. Wow. What has surprised me about my own writing is how much it is about me, and I don't realize it until sometimes years later. When I wrote the fifth season, and I've talked about this in other interviews, but when I wrote the fifth season, I did not realize I was I was kind of, trying to work through my own relationship with my mother. My mother was beginning to show some signs of physical deterioration due to various issues. And a part of me was beginning to realize I was going to lose her soon. And I did when she passed in 2017. But a part of me saw it coming, and a part of me wanted to write this story about a mother and a daughter. And it was before my conscious mind even began to engage with that. As for things, oh gosh, what was the second question again? I'm sorry, these compound questions.
Yeah, I should have divided it. That's on me.
That's okay. I talk too much too.
They basically asked, what did you discover about yourself that you don't think you would have were it not for your writing?
How much I like rocks? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it was a passing hobby that I was interested in rocks. I have amethysts and various little jewels and things that I found around the place, little pieces of sedimentary rock and so on. I just thought of it as an interesting hobby. I just thought of my fascination with volcanoes as an interesting thing. But if you commit to writing a book trilogy about something, you are in it for years. You will read those books many times. And if you do not like what you're talking about, then you will suffer greatly. And I legit loved learning enough about seismology to make the book plausible and geophysics to make it plausible, learning enough language to fake it, realizing how much I really cared about this world and wanted to see it go through those changes that are edging into spoilers. Things like that are always fascinating to me. How deeply meaningful to me some of these topics turn out to be when I think of them as just sort of passing interests or passing fancies. So that's really it.
Well, I have to tell you, speaking personally, there are few people whose new books get me more excited than yours. So I'm so thrilled that we got to share your new book with everyone here, and everyone who's watching. The World We Make is available for sale on our website, shop.nypl.org. You can check it out with your library card. It's great. All of your books are great. And thank you so much again for being with us.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.